All right, welcome to the Cyber Unfiltered podcast. I think that's our name. Is that our name?
Yeah, we got it.
That's it.
We mistakenly said unhinged multiple times, which might have some accuracy to it, but it is
Depending
supposed
on
to be
the day.
Cyber
Oh, we
Unfiltered.
said unnamed for so long that I just
There's a lot of happening here.
yeah, we're getting killed on that. Boy, do we got some news. We ended last week talking about Erie Insurance. We weren't sure about what was going on. But Matt, we have some news, don't we?
We have some news. Some stuff happened, which was kind of predictable because networks and entire companies don't go down for days and days without a reason.
Typically not. What happened?
Apparently there was some kind of cyber breach, but to be honest, we don't really know what. All they did was file appropriately within the timeline, barely, right? Like, wasn't it like down to the teeth, down to the wire?
Yeah, it was that 4 day mark.
What's that?
SEC says they have 4 days. They got it in 4 days.
By moments. But to be honest, normally we've seen some chatter on what's happened by now, or some kind of technical information, or at least what nefarious organization was involved. I don't know about you two, but I have found literally nothing other than official news articles just saying day 10, they're still down. Although I did hear they have phones working. I guess there's only phones at this point across the organization, but that's it. And that's all the employees.
The one notice I see says currently experiencing network outage that is affecting all systems. That was back on June 7th. That's a long time.
Yeah.
And they filed
10 days.
June 11th.
I mean, think about how big they are, how many people they cover, and a 10-day outage. That's impressive.
Yeah, and I pulled their 8K up from the SEC. That's what people have to report if they're a public company, and it just says that they identified unusual network activity. They activated their incident response protocols and took immediate action to respond to the situation to safeguard our systems.
So do you think that was them shutting everything down 100%, or do you think they were shut down?
I think a lawyer writes all 8Ks, and I think the lawyer wrote the 8K.
Very carefully to mean nothing.
Yeah.
So what is an 8K, actually? We should explain that because a lot of folks don't understand how this works with the SEC.
Yeah, so if you have a cyber breach, you have to file what's called an 8K.
Public companies.
Yeah, public companies. If you're a public company, you have to file it. If you have a material breach of data, you have to file an 8K. It's not a financial document. Just give it, basically updating investors on like what's happening, because it's important, right? Like if somebody's hacked, you kind of want to know that as an investor because it might change your feelings on investing in that company.
But I guess if you're a giant insurance provider, you have good lawyers where the 8K basically says nothing but meets the legal requirements.
Yeah. So legal requirements, you have to report it. But like, I mean, this is ominous. This doesn't mean anything to me. It just means that they detected a security event. Security event could have been detected because they had flashing, hey, you've been encrypted on that. Or everything just went down because maybe they were running VMware and they encrypted all their VMware machines. So their entire back end just went down. They didn't get like some flashing message. Whatever. We're just speculating on what it could be. We don't know, but we do know.
It's all unknown.
Yeah, it's definitely a cyber event. They clearly admitted that in the 8K. The lawsuits have already started.
Well, one thing that's not speculation though right now is the fact that they are named in a class action suit.
Two. Yeah, already.
Yep.
Like
so far.
We've talked about this before, like how quickly these lawyers are jumping on this, but man, they filed that 8K. They say there's already one suit. Let's see, what's one of these is
they're like digital ambulance chasers at this point.
They're quick, man. They're quick. They're both claiming there's a Federal Trade Commission or FTC Act everybody needs to follow. Section 5 actually dictates some reasonable cybersecurity measures in it. There's more to it than that, but that's
it doesn't say specific measures. It says protecting your data, protecting customer data,
protecting sensitive data. Right.
Both
lawsuits reference this. Yeah, and like we were at an event a few weeks ago, and we talked about this, and they talked about this specific act is being referenced inside of most of these lawsuits, regardless whether you're a public company or a private company, because it's kind of super vague, but you have to defend against it. So it's grants the FTC actions in this case, and they're just like, look, you violated this. So now they're going to have to go to court, and they're going to have to eventually and prove that they were doing everything that they should have been doing and following that act. And we all know that that's not going to make it to court. It'll be settled at some point.
Yeah.
I'd be shocked.
No, it's usually cheaper, even when they pay out millions and millions. I'm really, really curious from a technical perspective, like what happened here? Like, was there an insider mistake that opened something up? Was something unpatched that got hit?
Yeah.
I'm dying here because normally we know something. I want my popcorn.
Holiday gift card that came out.
Their official June 14th statement, right? Erie Insurance hasn't fully recovered from the network outage, but is making strong and steady progress.
Sounds like they're rebuilding a bunch of servers and infrastructure to me.
Sounds like
from scratch.
Yep. Also, this is their 100th year in business.
Hopefully, they didn't have 100-year-old security. But a bing. Sorry, dad jokes.
We can go deep with that one. But yeah, if you read it, each lawsuit, lawsuits cited violations of the Federal Trade Commission Act. They argued that they didn't follow the FTC recommended data protection practices such as encryption, access controls, timely breach notification, and it constitutes an unfair and unlawful business practice. That's what they're being accused of. Two already. There's probably gonna be more, and then they'll combine them into one.
I was just thinking that, and there's probably more than two at this point as they're coming out of the woodwork, and we'll see who's up in charge of this one. Some law firm's going to make bank.
Yeah, and remember, they had social security numbers, they had financial details, they have other sensitive information, all stuff the hackers want. So,
another thing I'm curious about is how long do they keep that data? Because I haven't used Erie Insurance for a long, long time, but do they still have my info from 10 years ago, or do they purge it after the 7-year 100 years? They have my ancestors' data.
Good thing is, unless they digitize that 100 years. Oh wait, maybe they did.
Maybe they did. Oops. They might know more about my family tree than I do.
Matt, they might be doing the same thing that we saw with Power School. Is like not purging any data.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, true.
Mm-hmm.
It's just in the system, and we need it for the future. How many times you talk to clients that say, "Oh yeah, we need to keep this data in case the client wants it, or in case the client needs it, or in case we want to know what we did." And it's like it would just keep adding more and more storage. And
historically that's been right, but I got to be honest. The last 3 conversations I had, I think their attitude has shifted, at least on these folks, because they've been seeing this happen, and they're starting to understand that the older stuff it's more liability than it is worth it if some client comes back. And they're actually starting to, thank God, finally listen to, let's put a policy in place. Let's put systems and practices in place to kill anything 7 years, 10 years, whatever your industry rate is.
I was actually talking to a law firm a couple of weeks ago, and I asked them how long they needed to retain some of these trial documents and stuff. And I said, and the message I got back was, we need to keep it until the person's deceased. I was like, how do you track that?
That's a lot of liability. And if they have to keep it, I guess you have to figure out how to deal with that. But I don't know. I'd check that. That's a lot of liability.
Well, you have to follow the law, right? So if certain things are required to keep for certain time frames, that's what you follow. But after that, you're free to do whatever.
So make the best of what you have to, right? Like every industry is a little bit different. A lot of nuances. So we're talking real high level. This is not professional advice.
Also, going back to the SEC rule a little bit, like, I don't know if you see the controversy around that, but like the American Bakers Association is trying to petition the SEC to rescind the rule. Like
Bakers Association.
Yeah.
That's not where I expected a fight to come from. Well, I missed this entirely.
No, they want the rule rescinded because they think that 4 days is too premature and that they're disclosing an ongoing incident. But
when you say bakers, we're talking about pies, right? We're talking about
bankers, like financial institutions. Yeah,
this makes much more sense. My confusion was strong. Sorry, carry on.
The American Bakers Association. They want their pies protected, and they don't want to, if that actually exists, they do not want the SEC rule. No, but like their argument, it creates a roadmap to other adversaries, harm the company's ability to respond effectively, and ultimately fail to provide clear, actionable information to investors, all while the company is in the midst of a crisis. Okay, that's your argument.
But they just need to be notified. It's not like you have to give the details, as we just saw with Erie.
Yeah, we look at the 8K and it's like, Okay, so they didn't say what threat actor it was. They didn't even say what type of security incident it was. They didn't
All we have
say.
to say is this thing happened.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
people
they
are
just said
apprised.
they've hired third parties and they're looking at it. Yeah,
So-
maybe they got to be a little bit more clear in the rule, but to get rid of
Well,
it,
a lot
I
of
think-
this is
I think it's
new.
cool.
I mean, we are kind of in the Wild West here as this stuff is getting formed and solidified.
Yeah.
But I feel like people have a right to know as soon as possible if there's a possible breach and things like that, because maybe they'll go choose to lock their credit after thinking about it for a while and things like that.
Well, and
Or
if
not
you-
buy Erie Insurance right now. This is not investment advice.
Yeah, but if you're like a financial institution, or if you just have to follow FTC rules in general, like that rule was changed to do 30 days. You have to if it affects more than 500 people, you have to disclose it in 30 days. So the SEC rule for public companies is 4 days. The FTC rule is 30 days if it affects more than 500 consumers. So if you're not a public company, you still have to report it.
But
But
it's
you have
not
30
like this is on
you have 30
fire
days.
immediately. Yeah,
Right.
and that,
So-
that makes sense. Less resources.
So maybe there's a hybrid approach where they could take that, they could extend it to more than 4 days. Because I can see the argument on both sides, but like there's a big difference between 4 and 30.
Mhm.
So it's something to think about, something to keep talking about. I still think they need to do it because too many companies were hiding the fact that they were paying off ransomware and stuff like that and just not notifying people. So,
Yeah. So they were up and running, but people's information was released essentially.
Yeah, I mean,
And
look at
they didn't know.
Uber. Uber CISO got convicted. Remember, they paid the ransom, just didn't tell
I
anybody.
forgot about that one. Just kept
Yeah.
it under wraps.
So,
Well, that's fun.
yeah. Well, so we'll see how this works out with Erie, but this is the pattern we're seeing, everybody. If you have a data breach and you make the news, or you have to report it, like for the FTC thing, lawyers are jumping on this. There's gonna be a class action lawsuit. We see it time and time again, and they're gonna challenge what you're doing in your business to protect the data.
Mhm.
If you don't have
And
evidence,
that applies to any business at this point, because
Oh, yes.
because it's the FTC regulations are rather broad about, and it's not this isn't like the FTC safeguards where they specified specific banking non-banking financial institutions. This is anybody with client data.
Bankers and bankers protect
Yeah.
those pies.
and so let's talk about a couple other data breaches. There's an interesting one. I'm gonna start with the safer one first. Virtual Mac OS X cloud service. I didn't even talk about this in the green room. 10,000 customers had their data leaked. So this is a cloud hosted provider of Macs. You can buy a Mac, remote into it, and everything like that. 10,000 users' data got leaked on HackerFlow. Extremely sensitive information. We're talking names, physical addresses, phone numbers, logins, passwords, reset keys, bank details. So they weren't encrypting the bank details.
Oh my God.
Some of their support tickets were exposed, including user IDs, IP addresses, messages. Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Mm-hmm.
That's a data dump culture. I mean, read more about that. But then there's another one.
That's a cool one.
Was that just client data? Did they actually get access to the actual machines too?
They must have, because they dumped client data. So I don't know how else they would have got in unless they were. So they got to it. We'll see. We'll see about that one. The Texas Transportation Department compromised employee accounts, had over 300,000 crash report records stolen. So that's going to be interesting because that's going to have, driver's license, insurance details, names, addresses, pretty sensitive information you don't really want out there combined. And they said that they're not legally required to announce that, but they did anyway.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean you're not legally? Well,
nice guys.
You're the state because you're not legally responsible. That needs to change. I don't care who you are. You should have to report this to people.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Yep. And then finally, this is the not safe for work one. Do not look this up at work, please.
No, seriously, don't. And if you're one of my clients where you asked us to monitor your, blog certain sites, don't do this.
Right?
There is a hookup dating service called Hetero. And the reason I bring this up is because they did something bad. They left an unsecured database open on the internet. This is never good.
But you should tell them what kind of data. I mean, it involved.
Yeah,
Okay, maybe not all of.
I'm
Maybe not all of it. Maybe the location part.
Well, I'm going to say what's got exposed because this is serious. 350,000 user records got exposed. 3 million chat records on a hookup dating website. Just take that for context. Names, emails, social media IDs, profile photos, sexual preferences, and self-reported STD status. If that's not bad enough, their GPS locations, their exact GPS locations, all stored in this database, wide open.
Holy crap!
Yeah. Yeah.
That's impressively bad. I mean, that is impressively bad.
The app's developer is arguing that it was a non-production test database.
Doesn't matter if it's
The
exposed.
researcher got access to, but they're saying that there's less records in there than what the researcher found. So take that for what you will. Be very careful if you use that app. I'm not going to repeat it again. Again, don't go there. But that is super sensitive data that you would never want out there. It kind of reminds me of like the Ashley Madison one when they got hacked. Remember they leaked all those people's information and it was like terrible. It was like,
but honestly, I think we've hit a point where everybody needs to accept that if it's something you let digital at some point, there's a good chance the world's going to see it. And should it be like that? That's up for debate. But the fact of the matter is this keeps happening again and again and again. So if there's something you want to keep private, honestly, yeah.
Don't use a dating app.
Don't use a dating
Don't
app.
use a dating app. Don't put it online.
Yep.
And,
or at least if it's a regular dating app where you're trying to meet somebody, maybe just be cautious what you put in there. And some of those things should be face-to-face conversations. But if it goes digital, it's at risk. That's just the hard truth.
It's a very safe way of saying that.
Tread lightly there.
Yeah. And our main topic for today, even though we've already covered kind of Erie, we've been talking about browser extensions for a little bit. And we've never talked about formally on here, but every time you add some extension to your browser to help you do something, it could be a password manager, it could be an ad blocker. Try to think of all the other things people use. VPN, I guess some people use VPNs. Be extremely careful with these applications because we're seeing a large increase in them basically stealing data.
Mm-hmm.
Just harvesting the data in your browser because you're giving them access to your browser information and you could be logging in your bank account. You could be doing, whatever you're doing on the internet. They can steal credentials. They can steal cookies to skip multi-factor authentication. They can do session hijacking. They can inject ads. They can redirect you. They can do traffic manipulation. Like there's a ton of things that can happen. And
we're even seeing some of these browser extensions out there. They start out benign and they're useful, and then they morph into something bad because the code's been changed and they get access to other stuff in the computers. Plus they're so easy for end users to install because usually there's nothing set up to block it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, unless you're doing if you're doing like an enterprise browser management situation.
And we can handle stuff like that. Like, certain clients can only install certain browser extensions that we need for them to do their jobs with trust, but do not put a coupon browser extension on your work machine. They have access to read anything that you're typing in there, passwords included. Safe practice is use a different computer. You should have a personal computer or use your phone for shopping or something, but it's a matter of trust. So when you trust the browser extension, you've opened that front door to that browser extension.
I say $4 on that.
$4?
Yeah.
That's worth a breach.
Hey, but there's been hundreds of Chrome extensions found that end up being fake. They were just straight up stealing data. And to Bob's point, they were benign maybe initially. Mm-hmm. Maybe the developer got hacked and they were modified. That's happened too, to where the developer of the extension put it out there and then somebody hacked them and then they changed the code and they re-upload it. It's like there's just a lot of things that can happen. So you got to be, even in your personal life, be very careful about the extensions that you use.
Mm-hmm.
Super, be very careful because maybe all the reviews aren't really real reviews. Maybe they're fake. And they're just trying
Wait
to
a
get
minute.
you
Are you
to
saying
download.
what I see on the internet's not true?
I don't know. You shared a good video. We should talk about that. But
We
There's
can
a
do
good
we'll share
That
video.
one might need that video. If you're talking about the
Yeah.
one, I think it might need some more time on its own because I feel like
Yeah,
that's a
I
really
think-
big important one.
I think that's a good lead for next week. We're going to talk about
Yeah.
AI and kind of where it's
AI and videos. Cool.
Yeah, because
Mhm.
it's going to be a good lead in. But okay, be careful of Chrome extensions, everyone. There's some bad stuff out there that's just collecting data, and it's where people think everything's safe. Well, if it's in a browser, it's safe, right?
Not anymore.
Nope. So
Anyway, let's wrap up this
So-
week.
so-
And
yeah, if you guys have any comments,
what should be the takeaway for this week, Chris?
definitely download every Chrome extension, install it, and don't clip that. I'm kidding.
Don't click that.
Clip
That would actually be a good name for a broadcast too.
don't clip it. Don't clip that. Clip it, like clip my audio. Yeah.
Audio.
Yeah. Be
Don't
careful.
worry.
Be careful with what you install and protect your data. And make sure that even though if you run a business, even if you're not a public company, you're still bound by FTC rules. And that can be
FTC
brought up.
rules are the big one. Make sure that you've got a process and documentation in place, because if you get that phone call that something happened and they're claiming that you wanting to know what you did to protect it, you got to have the papers.
Mhm.
And
I'm
like
telling
everything
people-
else. Oh, sorry.
And I've been telling people for a while now, logs and documentation are cheaper than lawyers.
Truth.
Always have a plan. Execute that plan. And if you don't have a plan, start today. It's never a better time to start today. On that note, we will see you next week. Comment, drop us a line. Let us know if you want us to talk about anything specific.
Later. See you next week, guys.
Bye, everybody.